I'm the boring one in my family. The spreadsheet person. The let's not put it on a card person. I'm 42, I pack my lunch, I buy generic, and I've spent most of my adult life believing responsibility is basically a muscle you can train. Last spring, that muscle started tearing. My mom's assisted living bumped her rate again, insurance reevaluated her coverage, and my brother kept texting me screenshots of overdraft notices like I was the family ATM. My wife, Jenna, was calm about it in that tight way people get when they're trying not to look scared. I started flipping stuff on weekends. Not because I love it, because I love not drowning. Yard sales, estate sales, church basements that smell like coffee and old carpet. I'd buy a box of tools for $5, clean them, sell for 30. It wasn't glamorous, but it was math, and math makes me feel in control. That's how I ended up buying a watch for $20. It was at a Saturday yard sale in a quiet neighborhood with maple trees and lawns that look vacuumed. A woman in a faded college sweatshirt had a folding table full of junk. Tangled necklaces, an old crock-pot, DVDs in cracked cases. I almost walked past. Then I saw the watch sitting alone in a plastic sandwich bag like it had been quarantined. Even through the cloudy plastic, I could tell it wasn't a Walmart special. Heavy. Steel. The face had these little subdials like a car dashboard. It looked serious. How much for the watch? I asked like I didn't care. The woman shrugged. 20? It was my dad's. I don't know. It doesn't fit anyone. $20 is the price of a bad pizza and a delivery fee. I didn't even haggle. I handed her a 20 and walked back to my car feeling mildly guilty. The way you do when you get something too easily. At home, I rinsed the watch under warm water, dried it with a dish towel, and the metal came out bright. Under the grime, the dial was clean and crisp. The second hand moved in the smooth glide, not a ticking hop. Jenna saw it on the counter and raised an eyebrow. You buy yourself a midlife crisis? It was $20, I said. Probably fake. I said it like a joke, but I was already feeling a small thrum of hope under my ribs. Hope is dangerous when you're broke. Part 2. I didn't go straight to, this might be worth money. I told myself I was just curious. Curiosity is a more respectable emotion than greed. I spent that night on my phone searching phrases like chronograph stainless steel watch subdials and comparing pictures until my eyes went blurry. The more I looked, the more uneasy I got. The logo looked right. The proportions looked right. Even the tiny etched markings around the edge, things most fakes get wrong, seemed sharp. At 1 a.m. I found a forum thread about a specific model that looked painfully similar. People were arguing over minute details and throwing around numbers I had to reread 3 times. $65,000, $80,000, $120,000 depending on the year. I put my phone down and stared at my ceiling fan turning slow, like it was thinking for me. I didn't sleep. The next day, during my lunch break, I drove to a jeweler in a strip mall. Not a fancy boutique, just a place with a neon repairs sign and a window full of engagement rings. The kind of place you can walk into without feeling like you need to apologize for your shoes. A bell chimed when I opened the door. The air smelled like metal polish and old carpet. Behind the counter was a man with gray hair and wireframe glasses. He looked up, polite and bored, the way people do when you're probably about to ask them to replace a watch battery. "What can I do for you?" he asked. I slid the watch across the glass. "I got this at a yard sale. I was wondering if you could tell me if it's real." "I'm not." I almost said, "I'm not trying to sell it." But that would have been a lie. "I just want to know what it is." He picked it up like he'd held 1,000 watches and this was just another one. He turned it over. His expression was neutral. Then he flipped it again, angled it toward the light, and I watched the color drain from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened a little. He closed it. He looked at me, then looked past me toward the back room, like he was checking if someone else was there. "Where did you say you got this?" he asked, quieter. "A yard sale," I repeated. My throat tightened. "Why?" He set it down carefully like it might explode. "I'm not going to say anything until I check something," he said. "Give me a minute." He disappeared into the back room carrying my $20 watch like it was evidence. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, suddenly aware of my own heartbeat. I come in expecting either a shrug or a laugh. I did not expect fear. Part 3. He came back with a magnifier and a small black book. He didn't look at me like a customer anymore. He looked at me like a problem. He examined the watch in silence. The only sounds were the faint hum of the overhead lights and, occasionally, the tiny click when he pressed one of the buttons. After a long minute, he exhaled through his nose and said, "Okay." I leaned forward. "Okay, what?" "This appears to be genuine," he said slowly, like he was choosing each word. "And if it's what I think it is, it's a lot." My mouth went dry. "How much is a lot?" He didn't answer right away. He flipped the watch over again, peering at the back where there were tiny numbers engraved. Then he said, "Tens of thousands, potentially more." My first thought wasn't "I'm rich." It was Mom's care. It was the Visa balance. It was I can breathe again. I felt lightheaded, like I'd stood up too fast. He held up a hand. "Before you get excited, I need to tell you something. There's a registry for certain pieces. Stolen watches, insurance claims, things like that. I have a contact who can check serials." My excitement thinned into something colder. "You think it might be stolen?" His face tightened. "I think it might be flagged. That's not the same thing as stolen, but it often ends up being the same thing." I tried to keep my voice calm. "If it's flagged, what happens?" He looked at the door, then back at me. "If you bring a watch like this to an authorized dealer and it's flagged, they may hold it, or contact authorities, or the insurer. It depends." My hands curled on my knees. "Are you going to call someone?" He paused. "Not unless you tell me to. You came to me. I'm not a cop, but I'm also not going to be part of something illegal." "I didn't steal it," I said, too quickly. He nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. "I believe you, but you need to understand. If this watch is real, it has a paper trail. And paper trails lead to money. And money makes people very motivated." He slid the watch back toward me but didn't let go until I took it, like he wanted to make sure I understood the weight. When I walked out, the sun was too bright. The strip mall looked the same as it had an hour ago, but I felt like I was carrying a live wire in my pocket. I drove home with both hands on the wheel, telling myself I would be rational. I would do this properly. I would not let greed take over. I also couldn't stop imagining a number big enough to erase our problems. Part 4. That night, Jenna and I sat at our kitchen table with the watch between us like a third person. She turned it over, ran her thumb along the bracelet, and whispered, "This is real, isn't it?" "Apparently," I said. I tried to sound steady. "The jeweler thinks it could be worth a lot." Her eyes flicked up. "How much?" "Enough to pay off the cards," I said. "Enough to cover Mom for a year. Maybe more." Jenna stared at it, and I watched the calculation happen behind her eyes. Jenna is not a monster. She volunteers. She remembers birthdays. She cries at dog commercials. But she also grew up with a dad who taught her that money is safety and scarcity is humiliation. We'd been living close to humiliation. "So what's the problem?" she asked. "The problem is it might be flagged," I said. "Stolen or claimed." Her face tightened. "Flagged how? Like, someone can just take it?" "Maybe, if it's reported." She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Okay, but you bought it. Fair and square." "It's not that simple." Jenna laughed, short and humorless. "Of course it's not. It never is." I told her about the yard sale woman, the sandwich bag, the way she'd shrugged like it was nothing. Jenna listened, then said something that should have been comforting but wasn't. "People don't sell something worth 80 grand for $20 unless they don't know, or unless they want it gone." That word, gone, sat heavy in the air. I tried to keep it practical. "I'm going to go back, find her, ask where her dad got it. Maybe there's an explanation." Jenna looked at me for a long second. "And if there isn't?" I didn't answer because the honest answer was, then I would have to decide what kind of person I actually am. Part 5. The next weekend, I drove back to the neighborhood. Same streets, same manicured lawns. The yard sale was gone, but I remembered the house. Pale yellow siding, a bird feeder, a wind chime that sounded like spoons tapping. I knocked. A man opened the door, mid-60s, wary eyes. He wore a polo shirt tucked into jeans like he had somewhere to be. "Can I help you?" he asked. I held up my hands. "Hi, I was here last weekend. Your wife sold me a watch." His face changed. Not confusion. Not recognition. Something like dread. He stepped outside and pulled the door mostly closed behind him. "Okay," he said carefully. "And I had it looked at," I said. "It might be valuable. I wanted to make sure you didn't accidentally sell something important." His jaw clenched. "She told me about it." "She did. She said some guy bought it," he snapped. Then he lowered his voice. "Look, it was my father-in-law's. He died. We cleared out his stuff. That's all." I could see the lie like a seam. "Did your father-in-law own expensive watches?" He stared at me, then said, "No, but he had this one." He swallowed. "He had a lot of junk." Something moved behind the curtain inside the house, like someone listening. I tried a different approach. "If it's flagged, you could get in trouble." "I could get in trouble. I just want to understand where it came from." He rubbed his forehead, and for a second he looked older than he was. "It came from a safe deposit box," he said. "My wife handled most of that. Her brother did the paperwork." "Her brother," I repeated. He nodded reluctantly. "He's a lawyer. He handled the estate stuff." That made my stomach tighten in a new way. "What's his name?" He hesitated, then said it. And I felt my blood turn cold because I knew that name. Not personally, but I'd heard it this past year at family gatherings and holiday dinners. That was Jenna's brother. My brother-in-law, Mark. I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, replaying every family dinner where Mark had talked about probate headaches and clients who don't label their assets. I'd always half-listened, assuming it was just lawyer talk. Now it sounded like a confession I'd missed. Part 6. I didn't go straight to accusing Jenna. That would have been emotional, irrational. I told myself I would gather facts. I called Mark and kept my voice casual. "Hey, random question. Did you handle any estates recently for someone in Westbrook Heights? Yellow house, wind chimes?" There was a pause, like a tiny click inside his brain. "Why?" "Because I bought something at a yard sale there," I said, trying to sound amused. "And it turns out it might be valuable. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not stepping into something messy." Mark laughed softly. "What did you buy, a Picasso?" "It's a watch," I said. Silence. Too long. Then Mark said, "Bring it by. I'll take a look." I stared at the phone. "You're a lawyer, not a watch guy." "My friend is," he said quickly. "Just bring it. Better to keep it in the family." In the family. That phrase landed wrong. Like I'd accidentally opened the door to a room I wasn't supposed to see. I told him I'd think about it and hung up. My heart was pounding, but my mind was oddly calm. Like a part of me had already accepted that something bad was true and was now just sorting paperwork around it. That night, I asked Jenna, "How much do you tell Mark about our finances?" She looked up from loading the dishwasher. "What do you mean? Does he know about Mom's bills? The cards?" Jenna's shoulders went stiff. "Why are you asking?" I leaned on the counter and tried to keep my tone neutral. "Because he offered to help with something." Her eyes narrowed. "What something?" I watched her face carefully as I said, "The watch." A flicker, fast, almost invisible, crossed her expression. Relief, fear, recognition. Then she smiled too quickly. "Oh, he just likes to be involved." Jenna is a terrible liar. She over-explains. She adds unnecessary details like she's trying to patch a hole with extra fabric. "He said keep it in the family," I said. She shrugged, too casual. "He probably meant, not getting scammed." I nodded like I believed her. Inside, something in me started to crack. Not dramatically, not like in movies. More like when you realize you've been walking on a floorboard that's been rotting underneath your foot for years. Part 7. I went back to the jeweler. Not because I wanted drama, but because I needed a neutral adult in the room. He looked relieved when he saw me, like he'd been half expecting the watch to come back with police attached. I talked to someone, he said before I even sat down. The serial is on a list. My stomach dropped. So it's stolen. He held up a hand. It's reported as missing from an estate inventory. Not a simple theft report. More complicated. Missing how? He pulled out a printed email. There was an estate 2 years ago. High net worth individual. The watch was listed among assets. Then it disappeared before final distribution. The Estates Council filed a notice with insurers and certain dealers to flag it. Estate Council, I repeated, feeling sick. He glanced at me. You said you bought it at a yard sale. Yes. He tapped the paper. The name on this notice is a law firm, local. The attorney listed is Mark. He said my brother-in-law's full name. I sat there, stunned by how cleanly the world can rearrange itself in one sentence. The jeweler watched my face. You know him. He's my wife's brother, I said, and my voice sounded far away. The jeweler exhaled slowly. I'm sorry. I felt a weird urge to laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was too perfect. Like some cruel accountant had balanced the universe and decided this was the most efficient way to ruin me. What do? I asked. He looked at me with the kind of pity that makes you feel smaller. Legally, you should talk to an attorney who is not related to you. Morally, I can't tell you, but I will tell you this. If you try to sell it quietly, someone will notice. This isn't a pawn shop watch. The moment it hits the right channels, people will come looking. People. Not just paperwork. Not just consequences. Actual motivated humans with money on the line. I left with the watch still in my pocket, but now it felt like it weighed 10 pounds. When I got home, Jenna was at the table going through mail. She looked up and smiled like everything was normal. I realized then how badly I wanted to keep believing her. It would be so much easier if this was just a random stolen watch and not us. Money doesn't just buy things. It buys denial. Part 8. That weekend we had dinner at Mark's house. It wasn't planned as an ambush. It was already on the calendar. His wife made lasagna, the kids ran around, and the whole thing had that loud, messy warmth families used to pretend nothing is wrong. Mark hugged me at the door. Hey man, good to see you. His grip was firm, friendly, practiced. He smelled like expensive cologne and red wine. Halfway through dinner, he clinked his glass and said, So, how's your mom doing? I nearly choked on my water. Jenna shot him a look sharp. Mark held his hands up like he'd done nothing. She's okay, I said slowly. Expensive, but okay. Mark nodded sympathetically. Yeah, healthcare is brutal. You two holding up financially? There it was. The hook. I set my fork down. We're managing. Mark leaned back, acting casual. If you ever need help navigating stuff, you know I'm here. Jenna's foot nudged mine under the table. Either warning or encouragement. I couldn't tell. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed calm. Funny you mention help. I went to a jeweler about that watch I bought. Mark's eyes flicked toward Jenna for a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. The jeweler said it's flagged. I continued. Mark's smile tightened. Flagged how? As missing from an estate inventory, I said. Your name is on the notice. The table went quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Even the kids seemed to sense it and drifted away. Mark set his glass down carefully. Okay, he said. That's unexpected. Jenna's face had gone pale. She stared at her plate like it could save her. Mark looked at me like I was being unreasonable. Let's not do this here. I'm doing it here because you're the one who put your name on the notice, I said, and I was proud of how steady I sounded. So tell me the truth. How does a watch missing from your estate case end up in a sandwich bag at a yard sale? Mark's jaw worked. His wife, who had been smiling politely the whole dinner, looked between us, confused. Mark said, It's complicated. I felt something inside me harden. Make it simple. He stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, If you give me the watch, I can make this go away. That was the first major twist, and it hit like a slap. The watch wasn't just valuable. It was leverage. Part 9. I didn't hand it over. I stood up, said we were leaving, and Jenna followed me out with a face like she was walking to an execution. In the car, she didn't speak for 3 minutes. The silence felt like pressure building. Finally, she said, "I didn't plan this." That was not the same as, "I didn't know." I kept my eyes on the road. "Then explain it." She swallowed hard. "Mark helped Dad when Dad got sick. There were bills. A lot of bills. Mark said there were ways to make things easier if we ever got in trouble." "We," I repeated. "As in you and me?" Jenna twisted her hands in her lap. "He said if we ever needed a lifeline, he had assets he could access. Stuff that wouldn't be missed." My vision blurred with anger so sharp it felt like heat. Stuff that wouldn't be missed. Like an $80,000 watch. Jenna started crying, quiet and embarrassed, wiping her face with her sleeve like a kid. "He said it was from a client who was dead and didn't have family. He said it was basically going to insurance anyway. He said," she broke. "He said you were suffocating, that you were too proud to accept help." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. "So you told him our finances?" She nodded, sobbing. "I told him about Mom, about the cards, about how you wake up at night and stare at the ceiling." I was scared. I wanted to yell. I didn't. Yelling would have felt like losing control, and control was the only thing I had left. "So what was the plan?" I asked, voice flat. Jenna took a shaky breath. "Mark said he could get something into our hands without it looking like a gift. He said he knew someone who was cleaning out a house, and they'd accidentally sell it cheap. You'd flip it. You'd feel like you earned it." My stomach rolled. "You set up the yard sale." "I didn't set it up," she said quickly. "Mark did. He just told me where to send you. He said it would save us." I stared at the road, the lines passing under headlights like a conveyor belt. All my rational restraint, all my self-image as the careful one, had been used as the delivery system for stolen money. That was the second twist. I wasn't an innocent buyer. I was the intended mule. Part 10. I didn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't excitement. It was the slow horror of realizing how many choices I'd made based on a story someone else fed me. The next morning, Mark called. His voice was smooth like always. "We should talk." "I'm done talking," I said. He sighed like I was being difficult. "Listen, you think I'm the villain, but I'm trying to protect you. That watch can ruin you." "You mean ruin you?" I said. A beat of silence. Then, softer. "It ruins everyone if it becomes a thing." I clenched my jaw. "Whose watch was it?" Mark hesitated. "Client. Estate. Name," I said. He exhaled. "You don't want the name." "I do," I said. He gave it to me. A name I didn't recognize, followed by a phrase that made my skin prickle. "Private banker." I Googled the name later. Obituary. Photos. Donations. A man with a careful smile and expensive hair. He died suddenly, leaving behind a trust and some vague mention of ongoing litigation related to his estate. I kept digging. Court filings, news snippets, anything public. It wasn't just missing asset. It was a dispute. Someone had accused someone of tampering with the inventory. The kind of case where attorneys circle like sharks. And Mark had put his name on the notice. Either he was the whistleblower, or he was covering his own tracks. The more I read, the less my life felt like my life. It felt like I'd been living inside someone else's scheme, and only now noticed the walls. That evening, Jenna sat across from me at the table. Her eyes were puffy from crying. "We can just give it back," she whispered. "We give it back and it's over." Part of me wanted to believe that, to throw the watch like a grenade and run. So I said, "Okay, we'll give it back." And for a brief, stupid moment it felt like a resolution. Part 11. We met Mark in his office after hours. The building was empty, fluorescent lights buzzing, the kind of place where voices sound too loud. Mark closed the door behind us and offered a tired smile. Thank you. This is the smart thing. Jenna handed him the watch in its little pouch. Mark took it with relief so obvious it made me sick. You'll withdraw the notice? I asked. Mark nodded. I'll handle it. And we're clear, I said. He hesitated just a second. As clear as anyone can be. I stared at him. What does that mean? Mark's smile didn't reach his eyes. It means you should go home and stop digging. We left. Jenna squeezed my hand in the parking lot like we'd just survived something. In the car, she whispered, It's over. It's over. And I wanted so badly to let that be true. For 3 days, I lived like someone who'd been granted a reprieve. I paid a couple bills. I made coffee. I answered my mom's calls without feeling my chest tighten. Then, on the 4th day, a woman showed up at our door. She wore a blazer, held a leather folder, and introduced herself with a name I didn't know. I'm an investigator working on behalf of the estate of, she said the banker's name. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. She smiled politely. May I ask you a few questions about a watch? Jenna made a small sound behind me, like she'd been punched. The false resolution shattered so cleanly it was almost impressive. Part 12. We sat at our dining table while the investigator laid out printed photos, pictures of the watch, close-ups of serials, images pulled from somewhere official. We received information that the watch surfaced briefly in the local market, she said calmly. We're attempting to trace its path. I tried to keep my voice steady. We returned it. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Returned it to whom? I hesitated. If I said Mark's name, I was pointing a spotlight directly at my wife's brother. But the spotlight was already there. I could feel it. To my brother-in-law, I said. He's an attorney. His name was on the notice. The investigator's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. I see. Jenna's hands were shaking. We didn't steal it, she whispered. I'm not accusing you, the investigator said gently. But I am going to be direct. The watch is part of a larger issue. The estate believes multiple assets were diverted. There are allegations of fraud. Fraud. That word is heavy. It's not a misunderstanding. It's not a mistake. It's a deliberate act. I swallowed. Why are you here? Because someone filed an anonymous tip? She said, flipping a page in her folder. The tip included your name and address. Jenna gasped. Who would? I knew. I didn't want to know, but I knew. Mark had said it ruins everyone if it becomes a thing. He hadn't been protecting us. He'd been positioning us. The third twist hit with a slow, nauseating clarity. Mark didn't just rope us in to help. He used us as an exit strategy. If the watch ever surfaced, we were the convenient idiots holding the bag. The investigator slid a card across the table. If you remember anything else, call me. And I recommend you retain independent counsel. After she left, Jenna crumpled into a chair and started sobbing like her ribs hurt. I sat there staring at the empty spot on the table where the watch had been, feeling something inside me go very still. I'd spent my life believing responsibility protected you. It doesn't if the people closest to you decide you're useful. Part 13. I hired a lawyer the next day. Not someone Mark knew. Not someone with a friendly smile and a family connection. A woman with sharp eyes who asked blunt questions and didn't let me soften anything with excuses. When I told her about the yard sale setup, Jenna's confession, the office handoff, the investigator, she didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed, like she'd seen this movie too many times. Do you have proof you returned the watch? She asked. I felt my face heat. No. We handed it to him. She closed her notebook and stared at me. Then from a legal standpoint, you might as well have handed him a bag of cash and asked him to maybe not ruin your life. That night, Jenna and I fought in a way we hadn't in years. Not screaming, worse. Quiet, raw, exhausted. You should have told me, I said. I was scared, she whispered. I thought it would save us. You thought stealing would save us. She flinched. Mark said it wasn't stealing. He said it was correcting things. Correcting what? I demanded. Jenna wiped her face. He said Dad got screwed when Grandpa died. I froze. What? Jenna's eyes darted away. You didn't know? My stomach turned. Know what? She swallowed, voice small. Mark said, your dad's inheritance. He said there was money that never made it to your family because... She stopped like she'd said too much. Because of who? I thought of my father. Proud, stubborn, always insisting everything was fine even when it wasn't. Always avoiding conversations about money like it was shameful. What did Mark say, Jenna? I asked quietly. She whispered. He said your dad hid it, or lost it, or something. He said you've been paying for other people's mistakes your whole life. The fourth twist wasn't about the watch. It was about me. Money hadn't just driven the plot. It had shaped my identity. My responsibility wasn't just a virtue. It was a reaction to a family history I'd never been allowed to see. And now, because Jenna believed Mark's story, because I believed my own mythology of control, we were in the blast radius. I called my dad the next morning. Part 14. My dad answered on the second ring, cheerful like always. Hey kiddo, everything okay? I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot because I couldn't do this in my house. My house felt contaminated. Dad, I said, I need to ask you something about Grandpa's estate. A pause. Why? Just answer, I said, and my voice cracked despite all my attempts to stay composed. Did you get an inheritance? Dad exhaled slowly. That's complicated. Of course it was. Did you get it? I repeated. Or not?